But this evening, we're going to hear about letters written by a Turkish spy. And you know, it's funny how life is curious like this. I've been waiting for a lecture like this at least since 1985, I think, when I first came across it, or maybe even a little bit earlier than that. So certainly for more than 30 years. So it's extraordinary how life can sometimes come around full circle. And so I'm looking forward enormously to what you have to say. But I think we just have to welcome our speaker.
Thank you indeed. This is a great opportunity for me. Actually, I realized I was really missing the Turkish spy, and I thank you there for giving me this opportunity to revisit him. And also, when I revisited him, I discovered something new that all these years he even hid from me. So I'm going to tell you later on this evening about it. But first, here is the Turkish spy Mahmoud. Everybody please welcome Mahmoud. The Arabian in his regular disguise as the Moldovan priest. And Mahmoud, please say hello to everybody. He's the Anglo-Turkish Society. Him and I first met in New York around 1995. And at the time that I was working for Cumhuriyet as the New York correspondent. And I was working with an I visa. State Department granted me an I visa, which stands for Information Agent. It's kind of a work permit for the journalist, foreign journalists working in the US. And I said, well, you know, that's right. I am a spy. I am a spy for my readers. So that's okay. And at the time, of course, independent journalism, having never secured a constitutional protection in Turkey, and the freedom of press was never really there, even born, but already waits out. So last 3 newspapers I worked died one by one. Some of their editors were put in jail. Some of the journalists were put in jail. Some of the owners were put in jail, etc. So I can summarize actually my whole career, which started reporting on torture in Turkey, and then a self-exile after the 1980 coup to New York, as just something, a whole career of journalism trying to find ways around the censor. In order to justify my political and diplomatic scoops, I had to also report on weird and wonderful stories of everyday life in New York. As you can imagine, they could be also compatible with the 17th century Paris life as well too. Just at the time, my best friend, who was teaching comparative literature at NYU, told me that she's been using my columns, my Sunday columns in her class, because they reminded her the letters written by a Turkish spy. And that's when I first heard about the mother of all spy books. And so I said, what is that? And she said, well, that's letters written by Mahmoud the Arabian. And so I said, okay, where do I find it? She said, you can find it in the library. So I ran to the library, and I found in New York Public Library a recent edition, which was published in 1978, an abbreviated version of the letters. So in those letters, I also learned that there was the first edition in British Library, which was published in English in 1691. I could come and see. So I came here to London, went to the British Library reference room, and I was granted permission to see the first English edition, which is still there. It's amazing. In that encounter, I met Mahmoud, and this portrait of him, which I would like to focus your attention for a minute. As you see, he's sitting on his table and writing a letter. He is having a little hunchback. He's short, bearded man, and there is some geographical things on the table, some more letters, an hour clock, and then on the wall you see a watch, and then a little light and a mirror, and there is a portrait. This portrait within a portrait, we will soon see, will be our clue. Let's say this is our crime scene, and it will be our clue, which is going to give away the spy's real identity. So on the floor, there is the money in the bag and the scrolls, and on the wall and next to his table, there is a library, and in the library, maybe you could read, there is Al-Quran, and obviously that's Quran, and then there is Tacitus, and then there is Saint Oben, whose famous line is, "The world is a book, and if you don't go around and see it, you will be only reading the first page in your life." So then, this is Mahmoud. Actually, it tells everything about Mahmoud. This portrait was done by 17th century great portraitist, Dutch portraitist called Frederick von Oben. And he portraited not only Mahmoud, but all sorts of powerful men during the time of Mahmoud, like King Charles II, Oliver Cromwell, King James II, King William III. So Mahmoud took place among these characters, these portraits. Not too bad, you know. I mean, and his time, he was among the powerful. So the book, the title page, introduces the letter written by a Turkish spy who lived 45 years undetected, reporting to Divan, the court of the Ottoman Sultan, about the affairs of Europe, living in Paris from 1637 to 1682. The letters were purported to be found in a corner of an abandoned lodging 12 months after the author, by all accounts, had mysteriously vanished. The moment I started reading the letters, I immediately, of course, fell into the spell of Mahmoud. In the late 17th century, he was an unprecedented character. Mahmoud was the first literary spy, the father of all spy novels, a genre that still enthralls us today. His letters are the birthplace of all the cloak and dagger conventions of international spy stories. Some argue Mahmoud was actually the first modern narrator. Italian academic Giancarlo Roscioni suggests that Letters Written by a Turkish Spy is the first novel in the history of Europe whose main character is a neurotic, solitary, hypochondriac intellectual afflicted by many of the phobias and obsessions that characterizes what has been called modern psychology today. He has been also the first memoirist, or at least the first pseudo-autobiographical narrator. He prompted political satire, which was basically followed by Tatler and Spectator soon afterwards. Mahmoud was responsible for the remarkable literary invention, the letter from the foreign character, offering insights into a society. So many have followed, as you all know, in this tradition, including myself, with my newspaper's columns from New York. He pioneered the epistolatory novel. People are still writing them, only with, today of course, email and Twitter exchanges instead of old-fashioned letters, right? And so, 6 birds in 1 stone, not too bad. It says, you know, historical records scores. Mahmud's letters report back to various officials of the Ottoman Empire and the Sultan's ministers on the military and political activities of their Christian enemies. As the preface of the work promised, the letters contain relations of war and peace and discourse not only of the affairs of France, but those of the Christendom, all Christendom. He buys information from informers, he locates hidden papers, he is followed by various agents in Paris, he's always making narrow escapes from detection. On one occasion he actually gets caught and put in jail. So it's just typical spy action kind of stuff in there, as well as he writes to his relatives, friends, twice widow mother, you know, and really very intimate letters. 17th century too was an age of terrible upheaval and violence. Protestant against Catholic, Puritan against Royalist, Christian against Turk. The carnage was appalling and the fate of humanity was doomed again, unless a common calm was achieved. It became apparent that the consensus based on a strong tolerance was clearly the mutual interest of survival. Mahmud's letters therefore popularized the new thought of the Enlightenment more than any other book ever done. He is an avid reader of European philosophers, particularly Descartes, who has a decisive influence on his thinking. In a letter, in his favorite friend to Netolu, he praises Descartes now for advocating emancipating of women and invites Turks to follow French in liberating their women. He writes, "The pen has almost supplanted the exercise of the needle, and ladies' closets, formerly the shop of female baubles, toys and vanities, are now turned to libraries and sanctuaries of learned books." He elaborates, "Their senses are generally as quick as ours, their reasons as nervous, their judgment as mature and solid. Add but to these natural perfections the advantage of acquired learning, what polite and charming creatures will they prove?" Aren't we? Mahmud confesses, being a vegetarian, he's a vegetarian, and the result of his benevolent impulses, so tender-hearted about the treatment of animals, he writes some letters against the prevailing notion of that the animals have no soul. And all the while he thinks to himself quietly, never once ceasing to be an observer of the society and events. But he's quite conscious of voyeurism as well. He confesses in a letter, "He that peeps in at neighbor's window may chance to lose his eyes." So he's aware of it. So he's an ideal character of enlightenment, while remaining a comic figure. Readers both laugh at and admire him for his comic blundering but good heart, while his ethnographic commentary becomes a device to create a modern author derived from the opinions of the naive observations. He's sensitive to hypocrisy and fanaticism around him, yet never attempt to effect change, except by being a warm advocate of liberal sentiments. So Mahmud plays alternately the role of a dogmatic nationalist, and then he becomes a cosmopolitan skeptic. And then one moment he is convinced the superiority of his religion and culture. At the next moment he is vexed by its difficulties and inconsistencies. So he views Christianity and Christian nations as earlier Christians did the nation of Islam. But the irony goes deeper, and in the early years of his European sojourn, Mahmud is at first as naive about his own religion and nation as Christians used to be or are about theirs, So when he puts these things against each other, he really mirrors the whole thing against each other. So the reader is really shocked to see themselves in the same mirror. And so it's a great, clever mechanism that he really develops for the self-analysis and understanding. So as soon as the letters were first published, of course in 1684, this irresistible third spy of the European literature immediately won hearts of the people, of its reader. So here is the book. So the book basically, by 1776, made 26 different editions, 8 volumes like this, and they make 3,000 copies in each print. It's a lot of books. This. So this is. I'll pass this around if you want to just see. This is a 27th edition, 23rd edition. Sorry, which is one of the last editions, and it's 1736. So it's still 300 years old. I got it in the London Library, so of course these letters immediately were pirated, repirated, alluded to, discussed, imitated, augmented, and continuations, both French and English authors. Of course, for any author, it's mouth-watering material, full of stuff. So you can't really hold. So all sorts of spy novels mushroomed afterwards. So I'm starting to count them to you. I won't be able to do a whole thing, but in 1698, the satirical writer Ned Ward's complete survey of the London scene in 18-month installments as the London Spy. In 1706, Galien Coutlitz published The French Spy, or the Memoirs of the Jean-Baptiste de La Fontaine. 1709 saw the publication of Charles Gildon's The Golden Spy, or Political Journal of the British Rights Entertainment. 1713, Captain Bland's York Spy was printed. And no lesser literary figure than Daniel Defoe, the prolific journalist and author of Robinson Crusoe, also became attracted to Mahmoud immediately. In 1716, Defoe extended Mahmoud's account with the continuation of Turkish letters written by a Turkish spy in Paris. In 1721, Montesquieu now published his famous Lettres Paysannes, Persian Letters, which is a satire of society through the eyes of imaginary Persian character living in Paris and Europe, pointing out absurdities of contemporary French society. In 1739 came the Jewish spy, and then the German spy. In 1755, the Invisible Spy by Eliza Haywood, and many more. So there's this really explosion of novels, spy novels right afterwards. In 1760, the Irish novelist and playwright Oliver Goldsmith published a series of letters under the title The Citizen of the World, in which a Chinese traveler this time comments on English society. Comments in the same way, ironically, sometimes moralistically, just like Mahmoud. It was reissued, this book was reissued at least 15 times in French, as often as in English by 1770. So clearly the Turkish spy achieved a secure place in European literature for itself. But the authorship of the mother of all these spy books remained one of the literature's most successfully guarded secrets, and is still today matter of controversy. So, history records on April 15, 1683, a political refugee from Genoa called Giovanni Paolo Marana presented a draft manuscript to Louis XIV in Paris titled L'esploratore turco e le di lui pratiche segrete con la porta ottomana scoperte in Parigi nel regno di Luigi il Grande l'anno 683, tomo primo, which is Turkish spy, and through him the secret practices of the Ottoman court found in Paris during the reign of Louis the Great in the year of 1683. So Marana was born in 1642 to once a noble family somewhere near Genoa, and they were impoverished at the time when he was growing up. Then one of Italy's, Genoa was the maritime republic and former home of Christopher Columbus, obviously. And as a young man, he was implicated or became involved in a plot against the republic by an exile, Genoese exile again, Count Raffaella della Torre. Della Torre convinced Duke of neighboring Savoy to attack on Genoa, and Duke of Savoy, having Savona in mind, wanted to get Savona for the port city. Savona also is the place that Columbus once wrote his transcription of his journeys. So there was a very short war between Genoa and Savoy between 1672 and 1673, and so Marana was implicated in this particular event, and Louis XIV, the Sun King of France, intervened, and a peace was concluded in 1673. But Marana was jailed for 4 years in Genoa. So during his imprisonment, he translated Seneca and all sorts of other philosophers, and he was so dedicated to work and write that when he wasn't given oil or ink, he used his toenails, I can't believe this, for lamp oil so that he could write.
Wait, how?
So I thought you should use your finger there, but he used his toenails, which is very interesting. I guess he clipped them.
Yes, he must have.
He must have. But anyway, you know, the toilet paper of these Marquis de Sade, and it turns to be the toenails of Marana here. So Marana was finally released to Genoa, Genoa's ally at the time, Spain, and he wanted to write this history of Della Torre conspiracy. And actually, the Genoese convinced him to write it under their supervision. So he was writing this manuscript, and finally the Genoese decided they have to take it, and they just basically took the manuscript from him. So he escaped to Lyon, and he rewrote the whole thing and published it in 1682 in Lyon. And he dedicated the work to his patron at the time, who was the Duke of Monaco. And the Duke of Monaco was the ally of Louis XIV, so I think that's how he found his way. Now, having written a history, political history, he's now a political historian. He tried to get himself a royal support. So he went to Louis XIV, and he convinced Louis XIV that he would write an account of his reign, a sympathical account of his reign, obviously. So, so basically, in the preface of the part 1 of the novel. So anyway, I think at the time also when he was in Spain, he must have read Cervantes, Don Quixote. So obviously, I mean, you might all remember this or recognize this, that in the preface of the Cervantes' first novel, which was published in 1605, he claims that he's not the original writer of Don Quixote. He claims that he found the whole history in the archives of Manca. And at the end of chapter 7, he interrupts the whole adventure because he says the archive finished. So basically, you know, he keeps the reader sort of like in climax, waiting. So what's going to happen now? The archives is finished. And then chapter 9, he now declares that he has found in the market in Toledo a youth selling a parcel of old written papers to a shopkeeper who could not bear laying his hands on one of the manuscripts to see what it was. And he found it was written in Arabic, this thing. So it was, at that moment, good fortune hits him. There is immediately a Morisco that understands Spanish as well. So he presses this Morisco to read this Arabic manuscript. So Morisco translates, he says, this is, in Arabic, the history of Don Quixote de la Mancha, written by, I guess this would be Said Hamed Benajali, but I think Said Hamid Benaj Ali, yes, an Arabic historian. I think Marana basically got the whole idea from here, and he said, I could do something with this similar kind of mechanism. So the manuscript he presented to Louis XIV has the same technique in it. And in the preface of his manuscript, Marana claims to have discovered in Paris a packet of letters written in Arabic, coincidentally, asserting to have had the letters translated into Italian. So from Arabic he's translating to Italian, so he claims he is the translator. And then they were written by a Turk named Mahmoud the Arabian, who was sent to spy on French for his master, the Sultan of the Ottoman Empire. So this is how the Turkish spy was born. And with the title in French first, called L'Espion Turc. The letters are clearly autobiographical, although he's telling about the life of Parisians and all that. But we find Mahmoud's life runs parallel to the Marana's life quite similarly. The Italian author and his creations are both alone in Paris. One of them is a bachelor, the other one is a celibate. Both are exiled by a capricious government and impoverished, and they're constantly begging the treasurers of Versailles or Constantinople for funds. And like Marana's spy had been a captive in Palermo for 4 years, and for months, 1 week longer than his creator actually, spent in Genovese prison. Interestingly, Cervantes was also captive in Algiers for 4 years as well, so that's funny. And as I mentioned, during his captivity, Marana translated Seneca, so Mahmoud the Arabian too studies the great names of ancient Rome, Plutarch, Livy, Tacitus, and indeed Mahmoud is beaten for reading Seneca. So, in Marana, in the preface of the second volume of the Turkish Spy, thanks a Monsieur Charpentier. The censor, actually, Charpentier was actually his censor in l'Académie for his counsel and instructions. He's thanking him now. Charpentier gave his permission to print his third volume after he made Marana agree that he will drop 4 paragraphs from it. So he thanks Charpentier, and then Mahmoud, in the Turkish Spy, meets an honest carpenter. This time Charpentier becomes carpenter during the Sicilian captivity. The Sicilian carpenter provides Mahmoud the book of Plutarch, Greek geographer Strabo, Roman lawyer Pliny. So there's this whole thing again in Marana's life displaced in Mahmoud's life. Mahmoud then complains, of course, the difficulties that he had with censor by making Marana actually who's complaining it, but he makes Mahmoud face the similar problems with the censor in Constantinople. Mahmoud writes, "The Secretary of State, as master of all that is written, has orders to enregister my letters and examine them. He, according to his capriciousness or ignorance, may render the exactness wherewith I obey criminal by saying I'm a fool, or do not write the truth. This registering puts me in great pain." So Mahmoud's frequent meditations on the uncertainty of future, destiny, chance, and the darkness of human knowledge could have easily been the meditations of Marana himself, given uncertainties he faced in his life. And Mahmoud, a skeptical, hypochondriac, melancholic character, is much like Marana's, I think, own personality. Like his creator, Mahmoud is increasingly eager to retire from public life to a pastoral existence. Marana, a political refugee and collaborator with Genoa's enemies, obviously appears to have been recognized by Genoese agents in Paris in the streets and saved only by the protection of the Archbishop of Paris once. So Mahmoud the Arabian, too, is rescued by a friendly French clergyman this time, when he is recognized by his former Sicilian master in front of Notre Dame. Mahmoud hopes to escape to Lyon, the city where Marana had successfully published his history of Della Torre conspiracy. And he writes, Mahmoud is writing now, "Perhaps I may get to Lyon, where a stranger may lie, an age concealed and void of peril, as in this city," Mahmoud writes. So all these things are very clear to me that actually Marana and Mahmoud is almost like autobiographically similar to each other. And also, even if Marana constantly denies that he is the writer, but he's only the translator, the censor, when he was publishing the third volume, registered Marana as the author of the letters written by a Turkish spy. So we have that for at least first 3 volumes, which is total of 101 letters, registered in history as Marana as the writer of the books. But then that changes, and we lose this certainty. So I'll tell you precise sequence of the publications because it matters in the sense that the authorship problem of the letters written by a Turkish spy. So on April 15, 1683, Marana presented Louis XIV the manuscript, and the letters were, while he was presenting this manuscript, which was basically made out of 30 letters, he wrote a very lengthy prospectus in it saying that, and detailing 500 letters were altogether there, but he only gave the king 30 letters at that time. But there is that letter of Marana saying that there is 500 letters. And then in November 1683, the king granted him the permission to print consequently in French and Italian. So 17 January 1684, French edition, L'Espion Turc published, and 15 days later, the Italian edition, L'Espioratore Turco published. Virtually simultaneously, in French and Italian, the first volume comes to life. And then, in these books, Marana is written as a translator of the books. So he is the translator from Arabic into Italian, and from Italian it is also translated into French. And the French translator is known to be the French diplomat François Fidou de Saint-Olon. which was the first French representative to Genoa Republic at the time. So, in March 1684, the identical French edition was published. So this is now 2 years later, when Charpentier censors this 4-paragraph and publishes 2 more volumes. Now the 3 volumes are published in French. Total of 102 letters, the 3 volumes. So then, at that moment, when there was the censorship was really beginning a bit more heavier, Louis XIV, unfortunately, bombarded Genoa, as history records, without any just cause. So publishing the rest of the books becomes a problem. A year later, in 1687, the letters of Turkish spy were published for the first time in English. So this is the first volume and the second and third volume. So English preface said, to the reader, the editor insists that Mahmoud is no barbarian, which was then usual European opinion of the Turk. He reasons not as a barbarian, but like an able statesman and wise philosopher. Though these letters be neither Greek nor Latin, nor written by a Christian, they contain nothing barbarous. And though the ignorant be in great numbers among the Turks, there are yet men of great understanding that write the annals of the Ottoman Empire. So in this publication, Marana's name was mentioned as a translator again of the letters from Arabic into Italian. The Grand Seigneur's spy and his secret relations sent to Divan in Constantinople, translated out of Arabic into Italian by John Paul Marana. But there was one letter missing, so this translation missed letter 99. The reason is probably because it praised Charles I. In the febrile political atmosphere of 1687, which is the eve of England's glorious revolution, it was thought sort of inopportune to praise Charles I and being a royalist, who Mahmoud was clearly a royalist, and so Charles I was overthrown and beheaded, and he was quite anti-Puritans in that letter. So that letter, 99, never was published in any English editions, except once English edition was published in Amsterdam. So through this whole sojourn of Mahmoud's life in Turkish spy publications, letter 99 never appeared in English. So the plot thickens because in 1691 the letters in 1695 the letters about the book starts talking about 8 volumes. Now, there were only 3 volumes. Where is the rest of these things coming from? In 1694, all of them are published. 8 volumes, 529 new letters added. So, and with that, Marana's name is totally dropped, and there is nothing about Marana. And then, on top of it, the English translator says, translated from Arabic, written and composed by himself, whose name was Mijli. So that becomes a big problem and confuses the whole authorship of the letters and the ownership of the author. So when the 1691 letters written by Turkish spy was published in English, a Mr. Saltmarsh claimed to have discovered an Italian edition and brought it to England. Yet not only there's no Mr. Saltmarsh found anywhere in English publishing at the time, there is no Italian version either of the 8 those additional letters. The French edition of the last 7 volumes were not published till 6 years later, till 1696, 5 years later than they were published in English. So they couldn't be French, they couldn't be Italian. Clearly, something happened and they appeared in English. So in 1693 English edition, the translator claimed that the authorship, as I said, was Robert Midgley, who was the translator and the composer and everything else of these things. So Marana was still alive. He was still alive. And so this sudden appearance of the 529 additional letters in his lifetime, with no apparent French and Italian source, become a literary puzzle that has been impossible to solve, actually. Even he only mentions 500 letters in the first edition, so they're even more than 500 letters now. They're altogether 630 letters. At this time, the authenticity of the work, especially the secret histories and memoirs, were immediately questioned. So people started to question this, but it didn't really clarify. Instead, it made more clouds over it. And Marana died right that moment. It's not very clear where he died. It might have been most likely in Italy. Some people says in countries, some people says in Paris. But in 1693, just at the time that there was a transaction of these 8 volumes from one publisher to another publisher, Marana dies. So Robert Midgley, who claimed to be the both translator and author of the letters, in apparent bid to get the copyright while Marana was still alive, transferred this whole 8 volumes to Joseph Bindmarsh and Richard Sayre, the publisher of the volumes that now these things that you're holding in your hand, these are the same publishers. And then soon after that, Marana died, but English edition made the whole book more popular than ever. So his hero thrived, and he himself disappeared from the history. Nobody knows who Marana is, and never remembered his name anymore. Ever since then, the authorship of the Turkish Spy has been one of the most beautiful unsolved mysteries in literature. So there has been hack writers and other kind of writers claiming the authorship, and then I believe myself, from the beginning, I never thought it was anybody else, but Marana wrote all of them. I mean, I really think that Marana wrote all of them, and he's the owner of the 630 letters of Turkish Spy, and the writer of them. It's perfectly possible that, as originally planned, he completed the work. As he said, actually, during that time when he presented them to Louis XIV in Paris, then he realized that the rest of the volumes couldn't pass the censor, so he sold them to Hindmarsh in 1687 in Amsterdam, probably. Then Hindmarsh sold them to Midgley, probably. Midgley then hired an English translator of the first volume, who was probably somebody called William Brandshaw, who revised the first volume and completed the translation. And probably then the originals were destroyed. And the originals must have been in Italian. Unless the originals ever found, obviously, the authorship of the Turkish Spy remains a mystery. But among the many clues that I've sort of pointed out to you till now, I think the strongest clue is the language of the book. Because in English, they don't call it a native English or natural English. It is kind of, it's full of, first of all, it's full of expressions of Gallicism, but mostly Italianism is like what makes it really rich. And there is this, I don't know, it comes to my ear, this Roman pace you can feel in English. So and the style is very consistent from the beginning to the end. So in the newly appearing 5 volumes, it doesn't change. The sound is the same sound. It continues exactly the same. It's very difficult to achieve that if you were not to be the writer. So obviously that was really one of the most important things that sort of imply that Mahmoud, the writer of all of them. So I'm coming. One of the clues now, the best clue, I just recently found out myself, and I didn't know this till now. Now we will look at this picture, the portrait within the portrait. Okay? So you see a fisherman there coming from fishing, yes? Okay. So this is a painting, a portrait of a Sicilian fisher patriot I just found out, whose name is Tommaso Agnello. In slang, Masaniello. Masaniello. This is Masaniello. Yes. And the revolutionary fisherman who was leader of the 1647 revolt against the rule of Spain in Naples. So he's coming back from fishing, right there. So Mahmoud writes about him in 3 letters. They're about French efforts to undermine Spanish control of the kingdom of the 2 Sicilies by fomenting revolt. Mahmoud's great admiration for the martyr Masaniello is clearly an attack by Marana. You know, I mean, could be nobody else but Marana, actually, to pass the French censor again by putting a pro-French context in the letters. So I thought that it was a great observation by Von Hall to put that Masaniello out there in that portrait of Mahmoud. And that proves to me that Marana is the sole writer of the whole text. Marana disappeared into obscurity, so much so that he was finally completely forgotten by the history. I was recently in Genoa, actually in San Pietro, a former Genoese colony of the coast of Sardinia, where Genoese is still spoken in the streets, and a local writer said he had never even heard of his name. So when I learned all this, my first novel started to write itself. Like Marana, I titled it, of course, Letters Written by a Turkish Spy. So in my novel, it sets in the present time the original letters of Mahmoud the Arabian are found in a chest, brought by pirates to the North Carolina barrier, the island of Ocracoke. The letters are put up for auction at a sales room in New York. Then everything starts. Mahmoud, in his letters, in a way that sort of appealed to me. Okay, I have to say, of course there's all these spy things and action and stuff like that, but Mahmoud in his letters really appealed to me as a lover, because his infatuation with this beautiful, beautiful Greek girl called Daria, who's a married woman, unfortunately. He tutors her in Italian, geography and political science. He reports his attempts to free himself from her charms, and later his disillusionment at her cheating, when he realizes she has been all along false to him. So he resolves, he says, never to court another woman again. So to me, those letters are the most beautiful love letters I've ever seen in literature. So I decided to retell this story from this understanding. Hero, whose identity is the central riddle of my book, writes letters to his long-lost lover in an attempt to regain her affection. In his letters, he tells her the story of the priceless manuscript written by a Turkish spy in 17th century Paris, hidden for centuries by descendants of a pirate on the outer banks of North Carolina, that is to be auctioned in New York, and the secret that the manuscript contains would upend history. The reappearance of the manuscript provokes all sorts of frenzy of scheming. The Turkish ambassador demands the letters back, and then the country's heritage is on the case, and then the wealthy connoisseur plots turn the quick profit from them, and he's just trying to get them, and an academic struggles to suppress them to save his own reputation. So, on the eve of the sale, the manuscript disappears. Behind the scenes, a shadowy secret agent manipulates a journalist, they always do, for his own ends until the mystery is solved and the hero's identity revealed. So my letters written by a Turkish spy was published first in June 2001. It's here. Again, these are the different editions of it, but this is the first book. Today, as you all know, censorship is in Turkey worse than ever. And the publisher of my novels, who is a very dear friend of mine, this first edition, the publisher of the first edition, Osman Kavala, today he completed 332nd day in isolation cell.
Isolation?
Highly secured prison. Untried, unaccused, with no guilt or crime attached or registered. I will close my talk reading you first Mahmoud's longing of Constantinople, the way he expressed it in one of his letters in the final volume of The Turkish Spy. In describing this imperial city, I have imitated the painters who, when they would draw a beauty to life, following the conduct of a wild and strong fancy, they dash their pencil here and there, as that volatile faculty inspires them, curious in delineating every little singularity. So I, in portraying this queen of cities, this superlative beauty of the whole earth, draw my strokes at random. This I do not perform all at once. It were too great a task, but even like them, by fits and starts, as I find my opportunities. So now I will read, unfortunately in Turkish, my little paragraph about the longing. In my letters, hayatını gurbet ellerde tebdili kıyafet geçiren insan, hatıraları çalınmış bir zavallı değilse başka ne olabilir? Gözümün nuru, hatıraları çalınan Mecnun'un elinde kalan bir vakti zamandır. Bir de istikbalin hayali. Kuşlar misali. Kendi hayatımı, kendi istediğim gibi yaşayabilseydim, böyle hasretlere dalıp, kaybolup gider miydim hiç? Hey gidi yedi cihanın, hür kuşları hey! Ah gidi yüce adalet! Yaban ellerde casusluk yapmaya kalkışmak yerine, memleketimde kalsaydım, başıma bunlar gelir miydi? Ben bu cezayı hak etmedim elbet. Mamafi, her şeyin bir yeri, zamanı vardır. Sabırsızlık ve ümitsizlik en büyük günahtır. Belli ki adalet bugüne kısmetmiş. İşte bu vesileyle bu şehre geldim. Ve buraya Yeni Şark adını verdim. Geride kaldı şark. Eskide. Mamafi burası şarkı aratmaz. şarkının ötesinde bir şarkı.
Bravo.
So, thank you very much indeed. That's a beautiful story, beautifully intertwined. So that was really lovely. But well, I'm sure there'll be people asking questions. But you know, for those of us who, although we may have seen the book, haven't actually read it, could you tell us a little bit more about the content before we?
Yes. So actually, there is various letters in the book, and so it goes by date.
Mm-hmm.
So every single chapter you will see it starts from 1637 till in every single chapter it says undiscovered 5 and 40 years, and so each chapter goes date by date. Each volume goes day by day, and they basically talk about all these things that I mentioned, that actually extremely relevant of what we are discussing today, from animal rights to, and he writes very intimately to his friends, and then he writes to the court people, and then there are certain letters, especially in the continuity of the last volumes. Some people dies in the court, some people are sent exile, some people are put in jail, so there are people who replaces them. So he achieves certain authenticity with the continuity as well, by sort of killing certain characters and then the characters who replaces them, etc., etc. And so it is quite interesting. It's very difficult to read these books. I mean, I basically read the edited version of 1978, which was very helpful, and it was very beautiful. But I, here and there gaze into these as well, time to time.
Just, sorry,
Yes.
sorry, no, go ahead.
Yeah.
I just wanted to know if that 78th edition is still available.
Yes,
Yeah.
it is in London Library as well, next to these actually.
Okay. No,
Yeah,
but I mean,
it
but
was
it's not-
it was published in Wisconsin University Press,
Okay, okay.
and it is in London Library as well. As soon as I went to London Library, which was like 4 years ago, the first thing I wanted to see if they had the copy, and they have the copy. Okay, that's great. But it was really in bad shape, so I said, look, can you just do something about it? So they started to binding them again. Yeah.
Is your book in translation?
My book, no.
No. Would it be?
It would be very difficult.
Be very difficult.
I mean, as I read it to you.
Yeah.
Actually, it's very strange because I used Karamanlı Turkish in it, which was very strange because at the time I decided it should be, since it is the first spy novel, I will then use the first Turkish novel language. And the first Turkish novel was published in 1872. It was written in Greek alphabet, but it was Turkish, what they call basic Turkish, which is very sweet Turkish, which is really, so, and it was actually put in Turkish alphabet by somebody I know in the same publishing house of the first book came out, İletişim, Vedat Günyol, not translated, but put it in the Turkish alphabet. So I had that book seriyle Dünyayı Cefakâr Cefâkeş. So I decided to use that Turkish in it, which I had no idea that recently, just now, 17 years later, I discovered I actually have some Karamanlı in my family. So life comes around very strangely.
I saw that in the introduction to one of these books that it states that it's translated from the Arabic, but it surely it's Osmanli, isn't it? I mean,
yes,
written in Turkish, but in the Arabic.
No, I think I didn't say that. I was going to say that as well. I think Marana is very familiar with the Ottoman court and language. So I think in jail in Genoa, he must have encountered some Turk. I mean, I can't explain it otherwise. It's very, there's all these names in the books, Dinyetoğlu, Vezir-i Azam, all those things. It's not an English person would do. I mean, so he's very familiar with a lot of things, and also with Islam as well. He must have had some kind of exposure somewhere to a Turk or something like that.
Shino, I think the question was,
yes,
when it's described as Mahmoud the Arabian and the letters being translated from Arabian, do they mean Arabic Arabian, or do they mean Turkish written in Arabic script?
That's interesting, yes. Well, I think that's, yes. So, I think, at the time, Ottoman Empire used Arabic alphabet, but it was just like the Greek alphabet in Turkish. It was Turkish or Ottoman all the time. So that's basically, I think that's what they mean, the alphabet there.
Yes,
but
that's what I'm saying.
Yes, but I think that's, yes, exactly, yes, exactly.
Yes, yeah.
I'm keen on this fisherman because from here with slightly short sight,
Yes.
that looks so like the tarot card of the Fool.
Yes,
Really?
And it's so interesting that there's the mirror, whatever it is, on the wall.
Yes.
And it's going in the other direction, and one half is dark and one half is light. I mean, there's a whole lot of complex symbolism going on.
There is, yes. And I think Van Gogh knew Marana. I have a feeling he knew him. He must have known him. I mean, somehow he must have known him because he's Dutch, and probably, you know, they come across somewhere. I mean, it's just so incredible. I want to find out more about the story of this whole thing now, because I think this is a sequel.
How became a painter? This all
Yes.
engraving and everything.
Yes, I mean, if you look at if you type in Wikipedia Van Gogh, you'll see there is a whole strip of this big, you know, King James, this King Williams, this and that, and then there's the Mahmoud.
A fictional character alongside
all these characters, Oliver Cromwell and all that. So it's incredible. So it's very interesting to find out. I think it's in British Museum, this, as I understand, but Portrait Gallery also sort of has the whole collection of Van Gogh. So I don't know. That was really nice to discover.
Absolutely.
Yes, it is. It's a
real mystery.
mystery.
Byzantine.
Byzantine.
Now, what about the reception of... Oh, sorry, you were asking me.
I was just saying, you said your Turkish version was in Karamanlı Turkish.
Yes.
Now the piece you read to me sounds like Ottoman Turkish.
Yes.
By which I mean the language people would have
Yes.
spoken, my parents,
Yes.
even myself,
Yeah.
is what I would call very Ottoman Turkish.
Yes.
So what is the difference between that and the Karamanlı? I'm sorry, this is a distraction.
Okay, so I really don't know Karamanlı Turkish, by the way. I'm just pretending to write it in Karamanlı.
Okay.
The only way I know it is that the way I read it in Seyreyle Dünyayı, Cefakeş, in that particular book. And that's the sort of phrases of that book I was using,
Okay.
you know. Probably Vedat Günyol also wrote it in when he wrote it in Turkish alphabet. He also probably did. But what is this? I don't know what Karamanlı Turkish is. What is described as Karamanlı Turkish is basic Turkish, they say. Basic. Basic meaning probably slightly...
Basic.
you know, putting it down in a way, you know, maybe not that courtly.
Yes,
Like
but you
So
also,
you're saying it's courtly, my
that's
language.
courtly. That's
I
very
don't know, is
courtly.
it? Really?
Oh yes.
Oh, I didn't know
Of course
that.
it is, yes. It's not basic at all.
Okay.
It's very good Turkish.
Thank you.
Tell us, how was your novel received in Turkey?
It was all right. It made, as you see, 3 editions, and that was it. So just disappeared to history as well.
But this bastard
Like
Englishman pretending he'd written it, I'm shocked by that. You know, he bought it, you think, and then said, compose it.
But at the moment, you have to think that there is a lot of censorship, and I think partly it's Marana's fault, because Marana consistently saying, "I am the translator, I am the translator." He's never ever wanted to be written as "I am the author of this," except his censor registered him. He is the author, kind of thing. You know, like the censor called him, you know, don't, you know. But I think that's basically partly Marana's fault, because Marana didn't want to be known as the writer of this, and so Nijli obviously Grub Street, but clearly, but also it might be we should give him a little credit that maybe he's trying to protect Marana or who knows what, but anyway, whatever.
But I mean, there's a lot of money to be made on these.
Exactly.
I mean, there are 26 editions of 8 volumes.
Yeah, so you know,
That's a lot of
this,
money.
yeah,
It's like the Bourne movies of the
there are,
day.
And also, for example, when he gets, actually Marana is concerned about money, clearly, of course. When he gets copyrights, for example, from French court for 10 years, he gets copyright for 10 years, and then he's written any kind of forgery or any kind of copyright issue will be punished. The books will be collected. The 3,000 copies they're making. I mean, it's 8 volumes, 3,000 copies of that time is a hefty book, you know. So, and it's a lot of money. So then the person would, all the 3,000 copies would be confiscated. It's written like that in the copyright agreement, and so there was that, but.
Well, that might be another reason
but
why
they
they
were
were published in English, not in French. If there
but
there was copyright protection in France, then
yeah, and information is mostly taken from the copyright letters, the copyright courts, the letters, the given. So, for example, 8 volume is first mentioned in those letters. All of a sudden, becomes 8 volume, and. But maybe one day in Amsterdam or something, the originals will be found in Italian.
I think you can't afford to.
You can't afford it.
In your house.
Yes, in the sequel.
Yeah.
With Masiliello. He was fishing.
We just got a little house in a little island off Sardinia where they still speak Genovese because it's a Genovese fishing community. So we have hopes that they'll
fish
up there.
They'll fish it one day.
The pirate ship will end up there.
But what you're saying is that the whole spy novel, spy memoir, was invented by an Italian and published in Paris about a Muslim Turk spying on Europe. I mean, that's the most extraordinary. I don't know.
But that, it's a very interesting way of Orientalism, and also, I mean, it's still in today's spy films. I mean, look at James Bond goes to Istanbul and all that. So this Oriental thing is still going on. You know, I mean, they really.
But when the Ottoman Empire started receding after the Battle of Vienna, and that was what that was
1689, I think, wasn't it?
So it's contemporary.
1689, wasn't it?
Well,
David?
I think it's 1683.
The second
anyway, it's more or less around
siege. The
the
second
same time.
siege.
Yeah,
All right.
that's
1683?
Yes, because it's very.
1683.
So that's a very, very clever way of pitching the novel. I think this is very,
It's
very
completely irrelevant.
Yeah, I mean, it was the time when the empire was still at its peak.
Oh, yes.
So it was known in Europe to people.
Yeah.
And to come up with something like this would have been very interesting.
Yes.
Because it was not an unknown quantity.
And it wasn't it was, you know, what it became in the 18th century. It was,
And also, for example,
is a sort of memory.
Yeah.
But then it was alive.
And,
Oh, it was
and
very
also in
much
case
alive.
of Cervantes, for example, he is a soldier fighting in the Panto. And then, like, there is the, and so he, like that, puts this character who's sort of Muslim in the and gives the credit to this Muslim historian, Arabic historian, who writes this whole Don Quixote adventure and the history of it. So
but that kind of cultural mix, you see, is described by Noel Malcolm in his recent book, exactly covering that period. And what he shows is that all over the area of the Mediterranean covered by Italy, you have these people who are more or less acting as intermediaries between the Ottoman Empire and the Ottoman Empire's foes, such as the Catholic Church and perhaps also Britain as well. And so you get people who are almost in a no man's land.
Yes.
They can move from one side to the other. Half the family can be a spy in Istanbul, and the other half can be a spy somewhere else. So this whole idea of a spy is fictionalizing something that was very, very much part of people's everyday lives. This cultural mix, the idea of duplicity, the idea of using different currencies, both in terms of information and in terms of actual money itself, of relatives who cross the divide.
Yes.
And so no wonder, the carry, everything is the Cold War is the same thing.
Yes.
It's to mirror, as you said, mirrorings.
Yes.
And people who go between.
And Louis XIV is quite happy to be presented his reign, his whole democratic or Descartes or whatever, the life of Paris, all that, represented by this Muslim character, the spy who's going to tell the whole story of his reign in these volumes, this Mahmoud the Arabian. So that's interesting as well. So he likes that idea of his being, advertised with this book like that. Which is interesting.
And that go-between function that you were saying in the Mediterranean is particularly true of the maritime republics, like in the trading
Venice, and down into places like Dubrovnik. Absolutely.
Well, even Izmir, where or Istanbul, where they had Genovese ports, they had their own customs arrangements, they had their own trading concessions.
Cheers, yes.
How did you keep track of all this, though?
Yes.
I just don't know how you do it. Really. Because I would have lost my way. Who's this and who is that, and and all these languages.
Well, you're the one who knew who Masaniello was.
Oh well,
Come on.
Everybody in Italy knows who Masaniello.
But as you realize, if you just follow a little bit, you realize everything falls into their places in my life. So I'm like, I can't believe this. It's magic. It's magic.
I think what should fall into its place is somebody translate your. I can say this, but why can't this be done?
A little well, the whole point was to write Marana in Turkish, first of all, because he's been in all sorts of other languages. Why not? And claiming that original was Arabic. And so that was the idea, and then
but what about
it
Italian?
gives you great, it's a great, it is really something, I guess, when you first read something like that, you want to just do, I just want to do exactly the same thing now. And can I do it again?
But don't you think it would be fair also to have it translated into Italian? Given the
Italian.
Marana has been forgotten.
Well, Marana needs to be translated into Italian. Yes, look at this 1978.
You should do it.
You should.
Yeah, because I know Turkish so well.
Yes, well.
Turkish and me, no.
Why has he got a hunchback? What's this?
Oh yes, maybe in Italian it could work. That's true. I didn't think of that.
Yeah.
Why a hunchback? What's the significance?
Yes, he says, I forgot to read you this part because I want to read you this part because he describes he gives up his own identity in his letters. He says, low stature, of an ill-favored countenance, ill shape, and by nature not given to talkativeness.
That's a very
describes
useful
himself.
thing. So you abstract him from society because so he doesn't have to be part of it.
Yes, that's so good.
But it's interesting, all the sort of wiggles on the curtain, and presumably that's an astrological globe rather than a geographical one.
Yes.
You wonder what significance certainly the curtains have.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There are other Mahmoud portraits in other books. For example, there is some more, but they're very different. This particular one is really interesting, and also I think in this particular one, yes, that's right. He looks like Marana. Mahmoud looks like Marana, in my judgment. I mean, I imagine Marana like that, a little bit on the face. He has an Italian face, no? Don't you
Well,
think?
he looks more like
Who did that one?
somebody in the Sistine Chapel.
That one.
No, this is
Like God or something.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, God, for instance.
yeah.
Yeah.
And then there is another picture in the picture on the right.
Oh, there too.
Oh,
Yeah,
They
there's
have the
one
same
again.
thing.
Again.
Oh, look, it's the same thing.
Yes, that's what I'm saying. Also the same globe.
In the same,
So
And also
probably,
the light.
but
The
probably,
mirror.
That's right.
Half is black, half is
And
white.
then there is
Day and
the
night.
Al-Quran and all
I
that.
think that means that one is copied from the other. No,
Yeah,
Yes,
yeah.
it's too much coincidence.
But the globe is
different, isn't it?
different.
Yeah.
There are these suggestive rolled up carpets.
Well, if you just check the sign, the date, and you know who is being.
Yeah.
Yeah, who's copied from who.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But also the interpretation of what a Moldovan monk would wear, a Moldovan priest would wear is a bit different.
Yeah, very different. In fact, it doesn't look like a priest at all.
You completely plunged us into the mysteries of the 17th century in the most wonderful way.
17th century mysteries. Yes. So that was good to revisit them.
So that
Thank you.
was printed in London. These ones say Dublin on them.
Yes.
They
Dublin.
printed in Dublin.
This one does? I didn't know
Yes,
that.
yes,
Okay.
yes, it does,
Yeah.
doesn't it? Yes.
So I was looking at it. Why Dublin?
Yeah.
That says London.
There is also English version printed in Amsterdam.
So it was a variety of printing presses, perhaps. Yeah.
Places, yeah.
So it must have been really successful.
Yeah.
Amazing success. 200 years. It continued till 1776.
Yeah.
Well, the
26
first
edition.
spy novel, I mean, it's such a brilliant genre, and everybody needs it, obviously.
Yes,
As a
it was really.
vision of something
Yeah.
else, of the other, and
Yeah.
the other in our midst, the other looking at us, and us
Yeah.
looking at the other, and all that stuff.
Yeah, he just basically, in one strike of brilliance, revolutionized the whole thing, and then like rivers started to run.
Books and the hero and the books and all.
And they're very appropriate for anthropology.
Put it in
Oh, very.
Feel that?
It'd be interesting to know if it was published in Dublin first or in London first.
No, London first. In
It was
English.
London.
You mean in English?
Yes.
This is the
in
20
English,
this is the 23rd edition,
First
this one.
English edition is in England.
Okay.
Yeah, and then next thing was the Holland. They published it. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Amsterdam. So that was, and then they published it in other places.
Right. It looks rather like Galileo or something, doesn't
But
it?
also St. Jerome, I mean, all
Yeah,
these
it could be,
sort of
yeah, it could be anybody.
Yeah.
But maybe one of the key words though, who lived 540 years undiscovered. This, I mean, it's sort of the Da Vinci Code for the
Yes.
60s.
Yeah.
It's
Undiscovered.
the sense of looking through a spy hole.
And I like this part though, giving an impartial account. That's
Yeah.
I like, impartial.
Yeah,
And he's very angry about this truth. You know, he says that I'm not
To the
truthful.
divine.
I am not truthful.
But Shebnem spent her journalistic career as a foreign correspondent.
Yes.
Whereas Mahmoud is literally a foreign
Yeah.
correspondent.
Correspondent, yes.
Yeah, I think you should write something like My Life with Mahmoud. Yeah. And also something about like, okay, the history of the spy novel. Not necessarily a book, it could just be a long article. And
When we had when we had our dinner, when the book came out, and Osman and everybody, and James was there, and James made his first long Turkish speech, and in it he really complained that
Still my longest Turkish speech.
he really complained, there is this Mahmoud, I've been living with this Mahmoud for
There's 3 people in this marriage.
yeah, I was going to say that, and then I thought better
Quite a
not.
famous
Yeah.
line.
Well, I think we should just thank our speaker for
Thank you very much.
Great.